Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, and welcome back to the program Tuesday Night Talk with your host Lukman Skink. And this particular segment of the program, I've been looking forward to the whole of this week, and I'll tell you why. Fasiha Hassan, she is no stranger to the South African body politic. In 2015, she was thrust into the limelight as one of the leaders of the Fees Must Fall movement. That was the movement that challenged the high cost of university education in South Africa, challenged the lack of access, and forced the then President Jacob Zuma to promise free higher education, which he didn't live up to. But after the 2019 election, Fasiha was sworn in as the youngest member of the Gauteng Provincial Government. Last week, she announced on her social media pages that she had been appointed as the chairperson for the Economic Development, Economic and Agriculture Portfolio Committee. That's quite a mouthful, but should be hopefully working on shortening it. But she joins me now to discuss her appointment and how she plans to advance the interests of young people in South Africa's richest province, that is the Gauteng province. Fasiha, assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah, and welcome to Tuesday Night Talk.
Wa alaikum salam. Thank you so much for having me.
It's a great pleasure. I think first up, congratulations. This is a phenomenal appointment that you've just managed to garner in the Gauteng Provincial Government. What does it feel like, and what does it mean?
Whew, I think it's one of those that took me a very long time to process.
Right.
And, in all honesty, I think, we all have these ideas in our mind, and Allah obviously is the best of planners. And
Mm,
it's something that came at a time when, you pray for something and you're not sure if it's meant for you. And then Allah opens up the way. And I really feel
right.
like that's what this been. So it's been overwhelming.
Mm-hmm.
But also in a good way, because I feel like now we're starting to enter into positions where we can start making a more fundamental difference and change. So it's actually the chairperson of the portfolio committee at the legislature. Often people
Mm-hmm.
think that we're in the executive. We're not there yet. We're
Okay.
lawmakers. We play oversight over government, and then we focus a lot on public participation, our community work. So those are
Right.
sort of the three main things that we're doing, but obviously from an economic development perspective.
Hmm. Now, 3 years, well, 4 years ago almost, you were sworn in as the youngest member of the Gauteng Provincial Government, as a member of the legislature. And what's it been like? I mean, you're not 4 years younger. You're 4 years older now, almost. And I suppose experience is one of the greatest, teachers in our lives. But what's it been like for you? I know you just alluded to what it was like, but being,
Mm.
having an appointment. But what's it like being part of government?
Hmm. Yeah, so it's been 3 years since we were
Hmm.
elected. And I was remarking to colleagues recently that I feel like 2 of those years we were spent in COVID. And one
Right.
of the challenges that has really been difficult has been, you have these ideas in your mind about the kind of work you want to conduct. With a climate change bill, for example, we really wanted to do quite a lot of work around youth unemployment, et cetera, et cetera. And we are, but the reality is that for some of those projects, you're now finding that the budget that would have been there before, of course, now is going towards more of a crisis situation, whether it's the
Mm,
healthcare situation, whether it's the education catch up, whether it's the infrastructure. And I mean, these are all very, very pertinent issues. So for me, it's really been about learning to adapt, learning to work with what you've got, and also
mm,
looking for the collaboration opportunities, right? So even if it can't be in a traditional sense, how do you partner up with different members of the private sector or of civil society to actually bring about what you want? And a couple of months ago, we held a youth unemployment workshop that's actually led to the complete restructure of the youth unemployment intervention in Gauteng government.
mm,
So that was also quite a big win. And now in the upcoming next 2-3 months, we're actually going to be hosting a youth in business and youth in agriculture kind of session, because what we want to do is really bring about opportunities. And maybe just one more last thing that I can add in. We've recently passed the Township Economic Development Act, which was all in our portfolio committee. And I was very lucky enough and very humbled enough to run with that particular piece of
mm,
legislation. And it's the first time in years that we've passed provincial legislation. And it's going to be a game changer in terms of economic redress, particularly
mm.
for those who were obviously historically harmed by apartheid, but even in a post 1994 situation where we know that economically so many people are not where we need them to be. And this particular act of law is something new, but it's also something that can fundamentally change that if implemented correctly.
Oh, fantastic. Fasiha, being a politician can be a thankless job. Today you have great inroads you make, and then tomorrow people will be slamming you for one thing or the other. But what
Yeah.
keeps you motivated? What keeps you going and so hands on like you are and
Yeah,
successful?
it's an interesting one. I never expected to
Mm,
find Allah in politics or my
wow.
spirituality in the space. But really, what motivates me, the Sunday to Sunday kind of work, the 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, is
Hmm.
actually the idea that, we all have a duty as Muslims to change society.
Right.
And for me, I try and ask myself every day, what am I going to say to our Creator on the day of judgment? On the day of Qiyamah, what will I say? And I want to be able to stand in front of the Almighty and say, these are the numbers of things that we did to
Hmm.
bring about poverty alleviation, to change people's lives, to bring about housing, water and sanitation, a better education, a better life. And really, I view that as my duty as a Muslim. So there are many days where it's very difficult. And like you said, some days are good, some days are bad. But I truly believe that Allah has placed me in exactly where I need to be. And every time I sort of stray and I try to go into the private sector for a short while, I was sort of yanked back. And really, the motivation is that there's a deep sense of duty and a deep sense of Allah's opening up the way, for so many
Mm,
different things that I never expected. If you had asked me 3, 4 years ago, I never would have said to you I'd be here. I would have
right.
told you I'd be a lawyer at some law firm somewhere.
Mm,
Um, and that's also why I started off this interview by saying, we have ideas, we have plans. And like we said, Allah has a different set. So that's a
mm.
big part. But of course, seeing inequality, seeing injustice, and as a Muslim, knowing that my duty is to bring about social justice, that would be the main driving force.
Okay. Now, your appointment as the chairperson for this particular portfolio committee, um, you would be playing an oversight role of the executive, meaning like the MEC Parks Tao, you'll be actually making sure that Parks Tao does his job.
Yeah,
What
yeah,
What's it like working for him? Because he's a nice guy. Everybody loves him. I spoke to him a few times when he was the mayor of Joburg. I've interviewed him as well. Very gentle person. What's it like working with him? And do you think this it'll be difficult for you to play an oversight role, being the fact that you a woman, one, and two,
yeah.
quite young. You're very young.
Yeah, no, quite right. I mean, I'm 28 now. So
Hmm.
I'm the youngest chairperson at the Gauteng legislature, and I'd probably wager we're some of the youngest portfolio committee chairpersons in the world. But yes, it's not an easy job. I'm actually lucky to have MEC Tao as the sort of MEC in the two departments that we oversee. He's very
Mm,
humble. Not once has he closed the door on me or said, no, this is not something to take seriously. In fact, he's been very supportive and I think also
mm,
very honest and open. And even before this, he's the kind of person and activist who sees one's actions,
right.
less so what someone looks like or the fact that you're just a
Mm,
woman, or. And I think that also speaks volumes of his character. So it's not always easy. I don't want to mislead you. There are going to be very challenging conversations, of course, arguments, etc. But it's definitely something where I'm lucky to have the MEC that I have, somebody who respects me, but also respects the work that we need to do. And of course, economic development in Gauteng is just such a
mm,
fundamental portfolio. The heart of the economy is here. The economic
absolutely.
reconstruction plan, we're going to drive it from here. And a big part of our job is actually to push that. And even on Friday, we're going to be at the OR Tambo, it's a special economic zone. So it does
Hmm.
include the airport, but we're really pushing with the aeronautical elements. We've got the Tswane Special Economic Zone, which is around car manufacturing. And I don't know if your viewers know this, but the Ford multinational company has invested with us. And actually, once we've got this project, we've already started. We're employing over 10,000 people. But by the time we're done, we will be the largest producer of Ford Rangers outside of the US. And that's incredible. So there's huge opportunities for employment for young people, for people living with disabilities, for women, etc. And it's really good to have an MEC at the helm who takes it as seriously as we do.
Right, Fasiha, I'd like to just hone in on the Gauteng Township Economic, sorry, the
Yes.
Gauteng Township
Economic
Economy.
Development
e-
Bill.
Right, I don't know
Act
why I wrote
rather.
economy, economic development bill. It has come up for some, some people are a little bit concerned. They think, oh man, this bill is gonna, for example, not allow foreign nationals to own spaza shops in the township, for
Mm.
example.
Mm.
I think it does a lot more than that. But then, if you could just perhaps give us
Yeah.
an understanding of exactly what it's about. I know you've alluded to it, but just a little bit
Mhm.
more detail now.
No, thanks, Malala, for that. There's been a lot of misconception about the Act, and anyone who has
Mm,
that, I really encourage a simple Google or anywhere on my social media, you'll find it. The Act does some very important things, and I'll speak to the matter of foreign nationals in a moment. But the Act does something quite important. It
mm-hmm.
gives provincial government the ability to declare what we call township enterprise zones. Now, what that means is that we can basically declare an area and have targeted economic growth. So I'll give
Mm-hmm.
you an example. In Mayfair, which is where I'm from, we all know the state of Fordsburg, right? Anybody who drives into it, I mean, it's a crisis, right? We can declare that area as a township enterprise zone. And it means that we can focus on community cleanups. We can ensure that we are fixing the roads. We can ensure that we are having different support for SMMEs, that's small and medium owned enterprises. It means that we can do an incredible amount, but targeted. And what this effectively is going to do, in the intention of the legislation, is to undo spatial apartheid in an economic sense. So many of our
Ah,
families were relegated to the outskirts of society, right? Soweto, Lens, Aldos, even further than that. And there was no economic opportunity there. So what we want to effectively do is create economic opportunity everywhere. So we want to support, but not just only township owned businesses. Like I said, we can declare any area now, but we want to
mm,
support small and medium sized businesses. So, your mama on the side of the road who's selling vegetables, or at a
right.
taxi rank, those different small owner shops. What do we do to support them? Apart from funding, let's give them training. Let's give them an area where they can keep their stock safely. Let's get them to the next level. Now, let me address your question on foreign nationals, because it is something that's come up a
Mm,
lot. A simple reading of the Act will show you that it focuses on South Africans. Yes, it does, but it's not to the jeopardy or to the prejudice of foreign nationals. All over the world, you find different pieces of legislation, and we did benchmarking on this, by the way, that
right.
prioritizes South African people or people who own different businesses, but we've been very clear not to exclude. And this is what's very important. Nowhere in the bill will you say we are excluding foreign nationals. We will never say that. What we want is to create economic growth. But at the same time, Molana, we've heard the cries of South Africans. So
Right.
many South Africans are outside the economy. And if we're
Mm,
being honest with ourselves, we can't ignore that. So we can't. What
absolutely.
we don't want to do is create an enemy of foreign nationals. Not at all. What we're trying to do with this act is say, let's create an inclusive economy. Let's create an
Mm,
economy that can employ everybody, that can give everyone economic opportunity, and ultimately bring us to a point where we're at an equal level. So many people say to me, there's a huge problem of xenophobia in the country. Yes, there is. But a
mm,
huge part of that is linked to economic opportunity. If we were
right.
providing enough jobs and enough economic opportunities for people's different businesses, not just jobs, but giving people some economic livelihood, there would be
Right.
no need to directly compete with each other. We wouldn't need to see the kind of violence we do when it flares up. So, for me, a big part of social cohesion in the country, linked to crime
Mm,
and safety and security, is the economic element. If we solve this thing of the economy, everything else, in my mind, can sort of fall into place, because we're dealing with a
absolutely.
lot more. We're dealing with it systematically. We're not dealing with the
Absolutely.
symptom. We're not dealing with the cough. We're dealing with
Uh-huh.
what's wrong in the lungs. So that's
Okay.
sort of how we view this particular act.
Fasiha, you are in a position to actually make a difference because your appointment comes in the most important province in South Africa in terms of the economy. You've mentioned it earlier, but I want to reiterate. South Africa is the largest economy. Gauteng is the largest economy in South Africa and among the top five economies on the continent. So it's really really important that the work that you do. And the reason why I say this is because as a young woman, most of your constituencies, I would assume, are the youth. They are
Yeah.
also being excluded from the economy, and it's a particular. I think it's a crisis right now. How are they going to benefit the young people by your energy, by your initiatives, and so on?
100%. For me, youth unemployment is a national crisis. And I think we should deem it as such. Even though we saw in the last quarter the numbers are coming down, I don't view that. I mean, they're not coming down drastically. Out of 10
Right.
people, 6 to 7 young people remain unemployed. And that can never be a situation or a statistic that we can sleep well at night with.
Right.
Now, to get into the question of, well, what are we doing for young people? Now, that's why earlier I alluded to the youth unemployment workshop, but why is that important? What we figured out is that in provincial government, particularly in Gauteng, each department has a different program. There's an EPWP program, this internship, all sorts of different things. And what we found is everybody's working in silos. And so what this particular strategy is actually doing, the first thing it's doing is pulling everyone together under the office of the Premier. But the second thing is saying, right, this is the budget that we've got across different departments. How do we best spend that budget for the most impact? Now, that's very important because a lot of people say to us, create jobs, you solve the youth unemployment issue. If it were that easy, we would have just clicked our fingers, it would have been done. But what it shows us is that we're throwing a lot of money at a particular issue without necessarily impactful outcomes. Now, in the next few weeks, provincial government will actually be announcing part of this policy change and the strategy. They're also going to be announcing the youth directorate, which is going to be in charge of, it means an entire unit of young people deciding for young people, because this is important. We don't want older people who don't understand our lived experience or what we're going through to make decisions for us. So we have the youth directorate that's about to be appointed. And more importantly to that, we have a youth advisory panel. Now, this is going to be a collection of young people from civil society who are going to play a slightly different role. We don't just want politicians to make the decisions, whether they're young or not. We want to involve a huge cohort of society. And so what we're sort of doing is we're piloting in some ways a very interesting model of how we want to deal with youth unemployment. Coupled with that, I've mentioned the Act. The Act is very clear. It's also going to be assisting young people. We want to open up funding for youth-owned SMMEs. Already, we've got 250 million Rand seed funding for the Township Development Fund. And we've already got preferential policy position that will put forward young people particularly. Anyone can apply, but we want to ensure that young people are also prioritized. So it's a multi-pronged approach, but it's definitely not something we can solve overnight, Molana. And I have to be honest about that. We have cyclical unemployment, particularly youth unemployment. And it's going to take us some time to turn that around. But we're not going to fold our arms. We're not going to stick our heads in the sand. We're going to tackle this thing head on. And inshallah, we'll be able to make a dent in this. And I ask, for your prayers, for everyone else's du'as at home. Let's all roll up our sleeves. If you have a skill to give, if you have some time on a Saturday morning, let's go back to our schools. Let's tutor. Let's really get involved in rebuilding our society, because often the mistake we make is we wait for government to do everything. And the reality is it's not possible. It's actually not possible to build society as the state alone, and it would be a mistake to just leave everything to that. So for me, it's everybody coming together in different ways.
Fasiha, this question is one that I wanted to ask you out of pure. I just need to know. I'm curious. What's a typical day like for you? Now that I know you've got very long days, and we've actually come to the end of our interview, and I don't want to take more of your time. But just what is a typical day for like you? And is it anything like you thought it would have been before you got into government, or before when you were much younger?
Yeah, no, it's not what I expected. Different days for different things. So Monday is dedicated to constituency. So that's your community work, Mondays. And you can find me in my constituency office in Centurion or Pretoria East, even though I'm from Joburg, that's where they assign me. Tuesday, Thursday, and Friday are legislature days, and Economic Development Portfolio Committee, Education Committee, and I sit in the oversight of the Premier and the Legislature Committee, so I sit in 3. And so each day is a different portfolio committee, and Wednesday is a caucus day. So what happens is you actually prepare your debates, you do your research, you do a whole lot of stuff, and then Saturday and Sunday is also community work. So there's no one day that looks alike, but every day of the week is accounted for. So you'll find us in different communities doing different things, yeah, every day of the week. But if anyone's more interested, you can follow my social media.
Right.
Sometimes I'm better at posting than other times, but I do like to share because people want to know. And I think rightfully so. They want to see their public representatives active on the ground.
Hmm.
And, if you want to make contact, that's also a good way to do it. In the parliamentary website, you can even track our meeting attendance. And I don't think South Africans know that. You can even hold us accountable to the level of the amount of meetings we're attending.
So it's not a walk in the park. It's certainly not a breeze. It's a lot of hard work.
Yeah, I think I would have had a better quality of life if I went into a more normal career. For me,
Wow.
like on a Friday evening, people are with friends. On weekends, they're with family. If you speak with my family, they'll tell you they never see me. Even now, I had a meeting right before this. I was actually
Hmm.
in two meetings at the same time. We're going to be in Merafong. We were actually in Merafong in Orange Farm last week. We all over the place, but it's as it
Inshallah.
should be. We should be
But
hands on.
absolutely. Fasiha, I must say, watching you and watching your rise is certainly been fantastic to see. As I mentioned in my intro, we first got to know about you in 2015, and we're so happy for your success. We wish you everything of the best. We make dua that Allah Ta'ala continue to use you to serve the people, inshallah. And thank you so much for talking to us. I think this was a thoroughly enjoyable discussion, Fasiha. I really enjoyed talking to you.
Jazakallah Malana. And I'm always in support of Salam Media and the work that you've done. We also met each other at Newsroom Africa, so it's really incredible to see fellow Muslims do well in the media space. And
Right.
shukr, thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Fasiha, assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.
Wa alaikum salam.
That's Fasiha Hassan, the youngest member of the Gauteng Provincial Government. Of course, she is actually the chairperson of an important portfolio committee. It's an oversight committee as well. And she was just basically letting us into her typical day, the things that keep her up at night, including youth unemployment, including making sure that South Africa's economic reconstruction is actually pushed or at least driven from the Gauteng province, which is the largest, economic province in South Africa. It's the smallest in size, but it's the biggest. It packs the biggest punch in terms of the economy. And of course, inshallah, she was our profile interview for today. Jazakallah khair for tuning into the program from myself and the team, Brother Sadiq Joe and everybody else here at Salam Media. Until next week, assalamu